dovetail on what Senator Williams just said. Just about everything's been said, but not everybody's yet said it, so you'll have to bear with us a little bit longer. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel just a little uncomfortable with Ken being this big. He wasn't quite that big in real life. Ken and I were good friends. We served in both chambers together. We represented similar areas within the city and county of Denver. And we spent a lot of time together. And then when we were down here, we spent a lot of time together. When he sat in Representative Holding Horse seat, I was just a couple chairs over, and in the Senate, when I was elected, not by a vacancy committee, but legitimately. I know most of you have been elected by vacancy committee. That's a different story. When I got over to the Senate, he told me that he was going to put me right next to him, and when I asked why, I thought it was going to be some really good, important reason. He said, because you're the only person who laughs at my jokes. And I have to say his jokes were pretty funny. So we entertain each other quite a bit. Oftentimes during memorials such as this. And I remember one in particular, I don't remember which senator we were memorializing, but I leaned over to him, and it's totally fine if you guys have done this morning. And I said, you know, this is just an exercise for these has-beens that come down and talk about themselves in the pretext of honoring a fallen comrade. And he turned around and looked at me and said, you just need to be more respectful. And he was right. Because as time goes on, and you do more of these, they start to become people you know, people you serve with, people you call a friend. And so that's what we're doing today. Ken was deeply moved, and everything he did down here was colored by the fact that he was in the minority most of the time that he was down here. And that added a lot to his perspective. He was always fond of saying, especially when we were in the House together, he was minority leader, he was very fond of saying that he envied the people who worked to beautify the state capitol and spent their days polishing the brass, cleaning the floors, and making this such a wonderful place. Not just because they do good work, but because there's nobody over their shoulder telling them to, no, do it this way, or no, you can't do it that way, which is how we felt the minority was treated back in those days. I'm sure none of you can empathize with that. He was always attempting to reach across the aisle, and we've heard some anecdotes about that. One of his great ideas when he was minority leader was to have a basketball game, Democrats versus Republicans. I tried to explain it to him that might just exacerbate the partisan divide. Maybe we should mix up the teams, but he would have none of it. No, we're going to play basketball. It was about 2 or 3 minutes into the game, and he was wide open for a jump shot from the corner. He crumpled to the floor. The shot fell about 3 feet short. He totally torn his Achilles tendon. It was awful. He went to the emergency room. He was in a cast for I don't know how long. Helen, you probably remember. But the worst part about it was campaign season. And so he had this great excuse not to worry about walking his district and knocking on doors. He'll just use the telephone. But that wasn't Ken. And he and I were both out there campaigning, and he was faster than I was. He was on his crutches, and he was hobbling door to door. He would brag every night about how he knocked on more doors than I did, and he only had one good leg. He was tenacious, and he was committed. And that kind of bled over into the work that he did in this chamber. I'd also like to say about Ken that he was deeply intellectual about the issues that we've dealt with, more so than I would say most of us consider a bill or any type of issue or a rule or any type of issue that we're debating. He liked to spend his time thinking a lot about why it was we were talking about this particular issue and why Republicans were coming down on one side and Democrats were coming down on another, and really get to the philosophical roots of the issues that we were talking about. It was really his way to find that path to coming together, something that doesn't happen very often in this chamber in a meaningful way. And one of the things that he said that has stuck with me through all these years when I talked to people about what it was like to serve in the legislature, what it was like to work with Democrats and Republicans. But what he said is we're not really that different. He said our values are just a little bit different. Republicans tend to really place a priority on freedom. And Democrats tend to place a higher value on justice. And as you can tell, there's a lot of overlap between those two values. And the trick is trying to figure out in that Venn diagram where it is that we can value both of those ideals and make constructive public policy. It felt like a political science class. I heard you know, I've heard people wax poetic about how he was in his teaching days, but it really stuck with me. It's something that I think we can all bear to remember. Ken was a good man. He loved his family. He talked about them all the time. He did love this place, and he loved the good work that he was able to do. And he did it better than most, and I was honored to serve with him.
Representative Levy.